do, Mr. City Attorney, have a quorum. So what we will do at this time are move several items that I think are non-controversial, consent items. And so with that, if we could read, Ms. Sauer, item 1.
CRA and CLA reports relative to an amended and restated loan agreement with Normandy Terrace Partners and a reduction in the unit count for the redesigned Normandy Terrace Affordable Housing Project located at 538 to 48 South Normandy and 541 to 549 South Mariposa Avenues in the Wilshire Center Koreatown Recovery Redevelopment Project area.
Okay, item 1 will adopt the CLA report. Item 2.
CRA and CLA reports and resolution relative to holding property located at 13574 Foothill Boulevard in Sylmar, adjacent to the Earthquake Disaster Assistance Project area for portions of Council District 7 for an additional 5-year period.
Okay, then on that item, we'll adopt the CLA report. Item 3.
CRA and CLA reports and resolutions relative to submitting 4 transportation planning grant applications for transportation planning studies to the California Department of Transportation.
Okay, on item 3, we will adopt the CLA report as well. Item 4.
CRA and CAO reports and resolution relative to executing an agreement in amount not to exceed $500,000 with the Hollywood Historic Trust for the completion of Phase 1 of the reconstruction of a portion of the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Okay, on that item, we'll adopt the CAO report, bringing us to item 5.
CRA and CAO reports and resolution relative to purchasing property located at 6909 South Main Street for not more than $575,000 plus closing costs for the Home Ownership Opportunities Sites Program in the Council District 9 corridors south of the Santa Monica Freeway Recovery Redevelopment Project area.
Okay, on item 5, we'll adopt the CAO report. Item 6.
CRA and CLA reports and resolution relative to amending and restating a loan agreement with East LA Community Corporation to increase the amount of a pre-development and construction permanent loan from $2 million to $3 million to fund development of the Boyle Hotel Apartments located at 101 North Boyle Avenue and the Adelante East Side Redevelopment Project area and related action.
Okay, on that item, we'll adopt the CLA report. Brings us to item 7.
CRA and CLA reports relative to extending the exclusive negotiating agreement with Heritage Housing Partners for the development of a for-sale residential project located at 5623-33 Elmer Avenue in the North Hollywood Redevelopment Project area.
Okay, on item 7, we'll adopt the CLA report. That brings us to item 8.
CDD and CAO reports relative to executing an $8 million loan agreement with the CRA for providing a float loan that assists interim funding needs of the Hope Street Family Center.
Okay, then on that item, we'll adopt the CDD report subject to the confirmation of repayment of the Ford Hotel loan and compliance of HUD eligibility guidelines. Item 9.
Motion and CAO to report relative to executing a float bridge loan of up to $4.02 million with the Old Financial District Limited Partnership for a maximum duration of 3 days from the unexpended portion of the Community Development Block Grant and related actions.
Motion by?
Perry Parks.
Okay. Alan, Mr. Clerk, what do you think we do with this motion?
Approved forthwith, sir.
Okay, then, based on Alan's recommendation, that's what we will do. Item, and Ms. Perry moans. Okay, item 10. Okay, we'll hold item 10.
Okay.
Mr. Cardenas has some questions on it, but I tell you what, go on and read it right now, but we'll discuss that.
Sure. CRA and CLA reports relative to awarding contracts in a total aggregate amount not to exceed $3 million for a 3-year period with 2 one-year extensions to 4 firms for land title services.
Okay. We will, again, like I said, we'll hold that. Item 11, we will continue. Before we go back to item 10, I have one card from the public, Kaifa. Oh, no, that's on item 12. I'm sorry, it wasn't public comment. Okay, let's, item 10, we'll deal with item 10 now. Mr. Cardenas, can we get you questions of the CLA, or who do you want me to bring to the table?
Yeah, the department, CRA
Please come on up. Identify yourself for the record.
Good morning, Kevin Sullivan with the CRA Administrative Services Department.
Good morning. I'm Rose Vistrovich, Associate Development Control Manager from Engineering Department.
Okay,
Okay.
Mr. Cardenas.
Now, these particular firms that have been put on this list, what service do they actually provide?
They actually provide the complete title services, including title reports, documents of records, deeds, easements. They also provide escrow services and all supporting services that are used by our real estate department as well as our engineering and asset management.
And they also provide foreclosure services in terms of defaulted loans and that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, one of the questions that I had for the department, and they provided us some information, and that is not only whether or not they have an office locally in the region, but where they're headquartered. And it appears that some of these categories of service providers actually have a pretty large number of them are headquartered in the city of Los Angeles, which I find kind of surprising. I'm pleased to see that, but it's still a bit surprising. Do any of you know the method that you use to confirm where these businesses are headquartered?
So when an organization or firm does business with CRA, we send them a business profile form, which they have to actually sign, an affidavit, and it states their headquarter office as well as their local office. So that's our one way, is to go back and check their business profile form, make sure that the headquarters office is in the city of Los Angeles. Now, when we went back and did the research for the letter that the statistics we sent you, we did not have business profile forms on file for all of those firms, so we ended up actually phoning many of them to find out where their headquarters office was in. So this report that we sent to you is kind of a mix of checking our forms versus actually telephoning the firms involved.
How did it come about?
Mr. Cardenas, let me jump in 1 second, because I hope we shouldn't be surprised, and I just want to ask a couple of questions, because I might have a senior moment and forget. You know, ever since I've been on this committee, Mr. Cardenas, I believe, has been on this committee, and this is a question that he brings up on a regular basis, where it relates to where these companies are HQ'd, and not just his desire, but our desire to try to identify as many companies that are within the city of Los Angeles. So I'm hoping that you've taken heed to that. So, I mean, is part of it because Mr. Cardenas has taken the lead on this committee and made this request, or is it just that you lucked up this time and the people wound up?
Well, I mean,
so that's my question.
The CRA does outreach, and a lot of outreach is targeted towards Los Angeles. We advertise in local papers. We maintain a local vendor list. We send to local outreach organizations all of our solicitations so they can pass them out to their members. So it's not by accident that so many of them are in Los Angeles, but we do not at this time have a local policy, a preference policy for giving points in terms of scoring, but we do our outreach in Los Angeles, which is basically why we have so many local firms.
So anyway, I just wanted to try to bring that out, Mr. Cardenas, because to a certain degree, it's been your banging that over these years that we might be bearing some fruit. But anyway, back to you. Oh, we've been joined by Councilmember Richard Alico.
So how is it that it turned out that there's a form that they fill out explaining various information, including where they're headquartered and where they have a local office or not? How did it turn out that we didn't have some of those on file when we had already?
Well, we were trying to respond to your question quickly, and we typically send many of the records to our storage, offsite storage, every 2 years. So since some of these firms had responded to proposals more than 2 years ago, we didn't have them handy, and they hadn't been scanned and made available. So rather than wait to pull them out of storage, we actually decided to just go ahead and phone the firms to try and get
What I would do if I were you we live in a country where corporate buyouts are common, and we live in a country where there's a lot of industries, especially such as these industries, that actually change ownership. They may not change the marquee on the sign, but the actual owner, therefore where the headquarters is, actually changes from year to year. So the fact that you have information from a couple of years ago, unless there's some kind of form that basically states, if you filled out such a form before, if nothing has changed, sign here, and then we will have to depend on our archives in order to verify that information, should we choose to. But what I would recommend, unless you have something like that, where they're once again signing under penalty of perjury that nothing's changed, that you actually, at every application opportunity, that they actually give us that information.
Yes, sir.
Every time.
And in fact, when we did this research, we saw there was a hole in our process, and so we actually are going to now require that they submit annual forms.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was just talking to a firm from Chicago, an owner of a firm in Chicago, on a financial firm, and I happened to ask him, where are you? He says, well, I'm in Marina Del Rey. I'm right around the corner. I thought he was in Chicago. And I said, what are you doing? He says, well, we're buying a company here in Marina Del Rey. So that company is in LA County. It's one of our neighbors. So perhaps a year ago, before he bought that firm, they would actually honestly say our headquarters are here in Marina Del Rey. But once they buy them out and they reorganize, the headquarters is going to be in Chicago. I have no opinion about that. It's their business. But the fact of the matter is, that's a perfect example where a form filled out by this firm in Marina Del Rey last year would be accurate, but if we assumed, then that information would not be accurate now. Okay?
Under those circumstances, I agree with you, and that's why we're going to try and go to an annual, we are actually going to adopt annual certifications at that same form by all the companies.
Yes. Okay, and then on this one, I don't have a problem with this. I'm just a little surprised at the high percentage of headquartered in Los Angeles. Pleased and surprised, but at the same time, going forward, I would like you to meet with my staff so that we can go over the details of how you arrived at those percentages.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Cardenas, thank you. Then we'll adopt the CLA report on item 10. So at this point, I think we want to temporarily adjourn the regular meeting, Mr. City Attorney, and go to a special meeting. It's my understanding that that special meeting could not start until after 8:45. I think we've past 8:45. So if you could read item number 12, which is on the special agenda, Ms. Sauer.
Los Angeles Housing Department report relative to issuing letters of commitment for Round 1 of the 2010 Affordable Housing Trust Fund and various related actions, or various actions related thereto.
Okay. Before we start, we have a couple of public comment cards on that. We have Kaifa Tulay and Richard Alatorre, former councilman. So I'm going to go with, I'm going to use a council member perk here and have the council member come first, and then but you come up here too, Kaifa. You come up here too.
Councilman?
No, I want you to go first. Hey, he might learn something from you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. I am here on behalf of Advanced Development Investments, one of the proposals under the NOFA. And I just wanted to bring a few things to your attention that hopefully can be part of your deliberations and whatever decisions are made. Number one is we as a company do not understand why it is that when you look at the chart that was submitted, why it is that the housing department calculated more money that accordingly we requested when in fact we didn't request almost $1 million less.
What's the name of the project that's labeled on the chart?
It is Almond Tree Heights. It is number 15. It is a large family development, and it is something obviously that the company has done in different parts throughout the city of Los Angeles, pretty much in almost most of the districts in the central part of Los Angeles and some in the San Fernando Valley. So that's number one. We had requested $7.5 million for 92 units. According to the LAHD calculated gap, they calculated it as $8 million. Well, the end result of that takes us even out of the running. If they had stayed with what we had requested, we would be within the range that is necessary for development. The second part that is I wanted to bring to the attention of the committee is that, there is nobody, and certainly when I was in office, everybody obviously supported senior housing. It's important, there's a need and everything, just like there is a need in large family development. And unfortunately, the way that the awards went out, just according to what has already been announced by TCAC, which is the state, we're funding 3 senior projects, when in fact, the state of California has reduced the amount of commitment to senior projects down from 3 that normally we would be eligible for, down to 2. And that family development, family units that are the bulk, 65% of the monies that are allocated by the state have been reduced in the allocation here with the city. I mean, those are 2 issues that I believe, have to be taken into consideration. And number 3, when the NOFA went out, they stated that it was going to be for a certain dollar amount. Now, the awards are $10 million less. Now, I understand that there's an issue with...
Wrap it up, or I'm going to have to give Kiefer 8 minutes as well.
Give it to him.
Good to see you.
Go do it.
Okay, since Councilman Alatorre took your time, just submit your statement, and then we'll...
No.
Sure.
Good morning, Kiefer, good to see you.
Good to see you. Honorable Chair, honorable members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to talk about the NOFA, as the former councilman indicated, and to talk about primarily the process. We think that the LHD comes out once or twice a year and issue its NOFA. And then we gather and work hard and put together these applications and going by the deadline, going by the criteria that are set up in the program. And then we submit it, and they do their work, and then just choose, recommend these projects that they think are of quality projects. But they don't tell us. You can't get the department to give you any information as to why your project was not recommended. There's no transparency in the process, in other words. With the TCAP process, you apply, and they put the projects that make the list on the web, and then you call them, and they tell you why you didn't score in a particular area. And you have an opportunity to appeal. And sometimes they go back and look at their process and say you were right, and then they give you the points. But with LHD, there's no way of knowing, and there's no way of determining if you can come back next time. So I just need to say that, so that the department can come up with a process where there's some transparency in how they make their judgment.
That seems legitimate. That's legitimate. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Pickett, how's your mother? Good. She's still making that chicken dish with the brown rice? All right, good man. Good man. And his mother makes one heck of a Chinese chicken salad as well. Okay, if we could bring up department staff.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Rushmore Cervantes with the Housing Department, and I'm joined today by Tim Elliott, the Director of Major Projects for the Housing Department. Last December, the committee, mayor, and council authorized the department to release a notice of funding availability for affordable housing trust funds. It was approximately $32 million, $19.4 million in non-restricted funds, an additional $11.4 million in CRA 5% set-aside funds for redevelopment areas. Subsequent to the approval, the department did an extensive outreach to the stakeholders of the development community and got their input as to how best to address the next NOFA round as we apply for tax credits. We took those comments and suggestions in consideration in development of the RFP, or excuse me, the NOFA. We reached out to over 100 different developers in this NOFA process and held a pre-developer meeting to go over all the questions they may have relative to what the process is going to be. Through that process, we received a total of 26 project proposals totaling $120 million for 1,777 units. With those proposals, the department went forward with this evaluation process, and that included looking to identify the projects that would be the most competitive at the tax credit rounds. Just so you know, the city competes with other cities and counties throughout the state of California for tax credits. They're submitted to the state, and at that point, it's a competitive selection process from there. The department has had a very successful track record in the last few NOFA rounds, gaining about 80% approval rate at the tax credit rounds. So through this process, the department looks at various items such as transit-oriented development projects, projects that are in the South LA project area, projects that are achieving balanced communities. Balanced communities means that projects that are in high property value areas, because we need to try to provide a balance of HUD dollars throughout the city of Los Angeles. We also look at projects that are funded with new generation funds. This is a special fund that the city contributes $10 million to for acquisition purposes. Further, the other boosts that we add, such as we review project readiness, the amount of public funding, the gap relative to the overall project development, and the bottom line, the tax credit readiness, whether they're going to be competitive at the tax credit area. Subsequent to the acceptance of the proposals, the department was notified by the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee of two decisions that required the department to modify its selection criteria, one of which, as Mr. Alatorre indicated, was the senior housing funding. The Tax Credit Allocation Committee reduced the amount of funding for senior projects, and therefore we could only select the very top senior projects through this NOFA. Secondly, in regards to projects that receive state Proposition 1C funding commitments. What this commitment means is that the state has to issue bonds for these projects. Unfortunately, because the state has a significant budget crisis, they're unable to issue bonds. Hence, banks are not willing to lend money against these Prop 1C projects. TCAC...
So if I could jump in, Rush. So they're not going to issue these bonds, or they're just delaying the issue?
They're delayed at this point, and this is a statewide issue that the city, as well as the other cities and counties throughout the state are experiencing right now with Prop 1C projects.
Now, this Prop 1C statement that you just made, is that based on when this report from your department was put out, which is dated on March 5th, or is that a statement based on as of 9 o'clock this morning? When was the last time that the Housing Department of Los Angeles actually checked with this Prop 1C problem, as I'm describing it?
We spoke, well, this was as the date of this this report, and the director of TCAC indicated directly to us, as well as the developer community, that they were not going to accept any Prop 1C projects without full guaranteed backing by some lending institution. We afforded the opportunity for the developers that submitted projects to provide that backing level of guarantee. None of the proposals submitted guarantees that were satisfactory to TCAC.
Absent,
Slow your roll. I'm going to get to you, because I got a couple of questions.
Okay.
So now you will get your opportunity. But getting back to, well, I'm going to let Mr. Cardenas come back and hone in on the Prop 1C issue. You talked about the senior projects, and that either the funding was reduced or something happened were related to the committee. But it's my understanding that we're still funding more senior projects than we think people will be able to get the tax credits for.
Well, that's not necessarily true. We're not
Help
certain
me
exactly.
understand.
There's not an exact science. We're not certain exactly how many senior projects will get funded. And there were 3 high-scoring senior projects on this particular NOFA round that we felt that could compete at the tax credit rounds for 2, maybe 3 projects. So that's the reason why we put in 3, because they ranked very high, and we think they can be competitive.
Okay, now, we reduced the amount of the NOFA by 10 million, or what happened there?
No, what happens is we have restricted and non-restricted funds. The non-restricted are the home dollars. They can be spent anywhere throughout the city. The restricted monies are the CRA monies that are restricted to the redevelopment areas. So we laid out all of the money that we have available, and then it really is up to the proposals to where they are located. So we can only, if we have a project in a redevelopment area and it's going to be scoring high enough where we want to recommend an award, then we will draw down from that pot of CRA monies. If we do not receive a proposal in a redevelopment area, that money just sits there until the next round, until such time that we actually receive a project in that area. So rarely will you see the department coming forward with an allocation recommendation for the entire pot of money, because we're not going to receive projects in every single redevelopment area.
But now, every project is not, or every project is in a redevelopment area?
No, that's correct. Of the 7 proposed projects that we have before you today, 5 are in redevelopment areas.
And a lot of them are unrestricted, so we do fund projects that are outside of redevelopment areas.
Yes, we do, Councilman.
So is there not a creative way where we could have used the additional $10 million, maybe reaching down to get projects that are in redevelopment areas, then freeing up the unrestricted money that we could use in projects that are outside?
Ideally, that would be the way to go. Unfortunately, those projects that you'd referenced going down further on the scoring list to pump money into to award funding, they wouldn't be competitive at the tax credit round. So we would be earmarking monies for a project, submitting it to the state, and based on the experience that the department has in working with the tax credit allocation committee, they wouldn't be competitive. So it would, in a sense, be a waste to send projects up there that don't even come close to being competitive.
Okay, then I have 2 last questions. One deals with Mr. Alatorre indicated that I guess they either applied for or thought there was a gap of about 7 million, yet we penciled in 8.1.
What the department does when it receives the pro formas, they go through the entire construction cost, look at the overall financing, the various sources of monies, as well as what could be available through the tax credit allocation. And it comes up with what it determines as the gap and compared to what it could perceivably get at the tax credit rounds. There are many times that the proposals that come forward, even the ones that are being awarded, most times they're not getting the amount of money that they've requested. In many cases, projects come forward and the amount they've asked for isn't a sufficient amount of money to cover the overall construction cost based on the department's expertise and looking at these projects and what it costs to get the projects done and making them competitive at the tax credit round. So you're not going to see necessarily a dollar for dollar match as far as the ask versus what we determined the gap is.
So when you think there's a discrepancy, based on your calculations alone, you adjust that number, or is there direct communication with the entity as all they need is 7 million, and then you say, no, you need 8.1? Do we just on our own say 8.1?
Yes, we do. And that also,
I mean, if they believe it'll pencil in, Russ, at one figure, then, and we think that it will pencil in at another figure, it just seems, I don't know if maybe there's something that prohibits you from requesting. I just don't know how we could change a number, or if I wanted to change this number, I would call and say, my guys say this pencils in at 8.1. Now, why do you, tell me why in your mind it factors in at 7 or what have you.
and Councilman, that's a logical question. The bottom line
Well, I
is
got one. Thank God I asked a logical question.
the department has experienced a number of different exactly. The department's experienced a number of different projects in the past where it awarded a dollar amount to project and it was underfunded. They didn't have enough money, and it just is based on sheer experience of the department and knowing the construction costs and what it takes to get these projects done. And that's what that determination is made. It's not because we're trying to put the squeeze on one particular project. We're trying to maximize the limited resources we have, but also at the same time, once we do award a project money, we want to make sure that it's successful.
No, Russ, I understand the answer, and I think and I've publicly said it, I had the highest respect for you, and that it was I truly enjoyed working with you. But couldn't the opposite happen? Where you think that it's going to be this, but yet and still, I mean, every time we think it's going to be 8, does it always come in at 8, or does it come in at 7? Are we wrong?
Well, I'll defer to Tim, who's been over major projects for a number of years. He could probably address that question better than I could.
Well, what we've done is we've tried to hold constant what we perceive would be a winning score at the state. And a lot of that has to do with the amount of local money. Everybody has a perfect score, and then they come to these tie-breaking ratios. And the factors basically are how much tax credit are you asking for, and how much local money do you have. And the more money you ask for, the higher your score is. So we have to hold something constant. So we gave everybody a perceived winning score based on what we saw from unsuccessful projects in the county from last time. And so we decided to hold that number constant, and then we adjusted off that. So everybody has the exact same perceived winning score, and some projects would take more or less than they asked for to hit that number. Now, we made a conscious decision not to award more money than people were requesting, and then we would just have to rank what it would take to hit that number. How much local money it would take to hit that number. So in hardly any instance, like Rush was saying, that number is exactly what the developer was requesting. I mean, we have the luxury here of looking at 26 applications, and the developers are putting together their deals sort of in a vacuum. So we have to make adjustments based on our best judgment. And if in this particular case, the almond tree project, I mean, if we had awarded them what they had wanted, they would not be as competitive. I mean, they bid low, essentially. And they would not be as competitive as at the state level as other projects that had significant amounts of money from CRA and could get by with less from us. And that's really how we made our decision.
Okay, well, I'm sure there'll be some other questions, not just on this project, but on other projects as well. And my last question, when Kaifa spoke, he talked about some transparency and things of that nature. Is his concern a legitimate concern?
Honestly, Councilman, the department has heard transparency as being an issue. I think that in the past, the department has tried to provide as much information as possible, and our new general manager, Mr. Guthrie, has promised the developer community to have sit-down meetings with any developer after the fact and show exactly what they scored, where they ranked relative to the other projects, so that they can make a business decision whether they want to continue on the next round or not. They need to know for the next round where they truly are and what it would take to be able to get into that tax credit round along with housing and CRA money. So to that end, we've committed to extending meetings with any developer that has submitted a proposal to show them where they rank, so that we want to see successful projects as well. We want them throughout the city. It doesn't do us any good to have no transparency and people guessing and keep submitting proposal time and time again when we know for a fact they're not going to be successful. We should just let them know up front.
So this will be a new practice of
It'll be an
sorts.
enhanced.
We didn't do this.
Not to the degree I think that
Much.
we envisioned, and we're going to enhance this process that we can show these developers exactly where they ranked, so they know moving forward where they ranked, and then how they can improve moving
So
forward.
I can be assured that you will speak with Mr. Tilley, and obviously I would believe that he want to have that meeting. So if you would take care of that, I would appreciate it. Mr. Cardenas, you got it
Thank you.
for now.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier that there are some priorities or some anticipations of understanding how the state operates when it comes to how you score these projects and which projects get awarded here locally with this department, and before these people can go to the state and try to get their other awards. How would you describe the housing department's priorities? What are the main priorities that are considered when you're scoring and deciding geographically, the type of housing, et cetera, as you score?
Right. Well, first, the priority was approved by this committee and council and the mayor's office, and that was projects in the South LA area, transit-oriented development districts, and then the balanced communities, those projects that are in higher land cost areas. So those are the three priorities there. Beyond that, the department basically looks to maximize limited resources, getting leverage as much as possible. The amount of money we've recommended here is a little over a 3-to-1 ratio as far as the amount of money we're awarding here versus what we anticipate that it'll get with a combination of private, public funds and the tax credits. Our job is to try to take the minimal amount of money that we do have and maximize it and make it competitive at the tax credit rounds. So that is our charge, and the location of the proposals and the projects are basically driven by the proposals that we receive. And then we discuss with this committee, and that's where we set the priorities as far as awarding bonuses for certain areas of the city. And then it's our job to be able to spend the monies as wisely as possible to maximize the limited resources we have.
Now, where does the San Fernando Valley fall into that priority list?
I'm not certain if there are transit-oriented development districts in the San Fernando Valley. So, and there would also be if their projects came forward from the San Fernando Valley in certain areas, they would also get bonuses for the balanced community, as well as perhaps new generation funds if funds were utilized for acquisition. So there's possibility of 3 different bonuses being added. It was in the proper location as well as had the proper funding.
So you propose 7 winners.
That's correct.
And I'm looking here, and can you help point out which one of these 7 winners are in the San Fernando Valley, these projects?
There's a project called Canby Woods, which is in Reseda.
Mm-hmm. Any others?
No, those are the, that's the top-ranked project, was the one in Reseda. Yeah.
Okay, so of the 7 winners, there's only 1 in the San Fernando Valley.
Yes, this round, yeah.
And that's 98 units where the housing department is recommending $2.3 million for 98 units. So when you look at a unit count, that's probably the most efficient when it comes to how much LA housing dollars they're requesting based on all 7 winners.
Right, and that's basically the criteria we use. It's the amount of what it would take to be successful versus the total dollar amount that you would be eligible for, and that's how we rank them. So it's basically cost efficiency.
Wow, that's nice, because my next question is La Coruña. Coruña is in the San Fernando Valley, happens to be in my district, 87 units, and they were asking for $2.7 million, close to $2.8 million.
Right.
Help me understand why they were outranked by these other projects.
It's not receiving funding, Councilman, because it has a Proposition 1C commitment and a senior project as well that did not rank as high, but the Proposition 1C funding.
Canby is something that you just highlighted was a pretty good project, ranked very high, 98 units, 2.3 million. It's a senior project as well. So it didn't suffer that same fate, the fact that it's a senior project.
Councilman, it was because it has the Proposition 1C funding.
But you just said both reasons.
Well, there was
No,
two
excuse
reasons.
me. You just answered my question with both reasons. Now you're retracting that one reason and sticking to just one reason, the 1C?
Correct.
Okay. Mark your words, because I'm listening. So that being the case, getting back to my earlier question, you seem to have took a lot of diligent effort in making sure that you locally, representing a local agency, understood what the state's intentions are on the Prop 1C funds. Since submitting this report, have you or anybody from your department continued to follow the Prop 1C saga, as I'm describing it, that is affecting local projects?
In regards to speaking with the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee, no, we have not followed up with them. There are active discussions with Citibank and other lending institutions that are trying to come up with a solution to resolve this problem statewide. Those conversations have not concluded in a successful agreement as of yet, but we are having conversations and trying to fix the problem. But as it relates to the Tax Credit Allocation Committee, no, their decision has been made, and
Okay.
that's our guiding principle.
So if the news from Sacramento was that there is no Prop 1C saga, those bonds will be sold, they will be applied to the commitments that they've been given, therefore that Prop 1C would not be a scoring detriment. Would it be a scoring plus?
Depending on where the project would be ranked and scored, it could benefit it. There are projects that would have received funding if it were not for the fact that they had Prop 1C funding. So if there were some change at the state level and bonds were now being issued that would then cover this, and banks would be able to provide that level of guarantee that they would cover this, then certainly there could be a modification to the recommendations. But at the time of the transmittal...
I'm not talking about a modification to the recommendation yet, but what I'm just asking you to understand so that I can understand as a policymaker how you think, how you as a department thinks, okay? Had the Prop 1C not been a funding problem, but the state was able to announce who was getting Prop 1C funds, they were able to sell the bonds, et cetera, under that scenario, wouldn't the Prop 1C be an enhancement? Wouldn't that be a plus of another source of funds for a housing project? Therefore, that would actually enhance their scoring ability local?
Yes.
It would normally.
Yes, and again, it depends. There will be projects that are listed on this list of proposed projects that still wouldn't necessarily get funding, even though they have Prop 1C, but it certainly would help their score. Correct. And if this was not a problem with the Prop 1C funding, the recommended projects that you have before you would be different.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've been describing this process that these projects are going to have to deal with once they get local funding and then they apply for their state funds. You've been describing it as something that our department understands pretty good, or very well. Is it a science?
The science of determining what score will ultimately win is not an exact science because we're competing against other cities and counties throughout the state. We can't determine what other cities are going to be submitting. So we are trying to gauge what the competitive score would be. And like I'd indicated earlier, Councilman, the department has a pretty good track record of getting successful projects through the tax credit round. It's not 100%, and it's very challenging to do so. There are some small cities where they have pots of money, and they'll put all of the money into one project and submit that, and they are able to be more competitive than we are because the gap is that much smaller. But we're trying to maximize the dollars that we have.
So
And
the
therefore-
bottom line is it's not a science.
Absolutely not.
It's not a science. It's somewhat, it's, I guess it could be described as a moving target.
Yes.
And then you try to understand that moving target in every round.
Correct, and this is the last two NOFAs where we've been through the NOFA process and things change midstream, so then we have to modify according to what the state has determined, and then we are then tasked to realign recommendations based on the new information provided from the state to ensure that we're maximizing our dollars.
How many projects has your department built, not funded, but built, say in the last 12 months, 36 months, the last 5 years, the last 10 years? How many projects has your department built?
Well, I don't have those exact records. We've committed money to 128 projects.
No, you don't understand my question. Where your department was the developer, you actually built them yourselves, not funded, and that was the beginning of my question. How many projects has your department actually built?
Zero.
Zero. Yet, a few minutes ago, you were answering questions from the chairman, and he was asking how you arrive at adjusting dollar amounts that developers submit to you, and saying, no, 7.5 million, for example, is not the right figure. 8 million is the right figure. And therefore, based on that adjustment, it could have detrimental effects on their ability to get our local dollars, which obviously knocks them out of the box. If they don't get the local dollars, they can't even go compete in the state for the state dollars, right?
Correct.
Yet, you're telling a developer, in some cases, that has built maybe one project, 2 projects, 10 projects, 20 projects, even partnering with the city of Los Angeles and the state of California in building those projects, yet you feel compelled to adjust their numbers, and therefore, they do not make the winners list, based on your adjustment, which actually knocks them out in some cases.
Yes.
Yet you haven't built any projects.
Correct.
And I'm not saying you personally,
I understand,
but your
Councilman.
team.
That's correct, and
Your
as just
team is not a project builder, you're not developers.
that is correct, Councilman.
And then yet you just
Many of
admitted
them,
a few
yeah.
minutes ago that it isn't a science, and it is moving targets, and you are trying your best to try to hit those targets, to try to maximize the success of the applications that go up to the state.
Correct. Again, Councilman, those numbers are adjusted based on the projects that the department has overseen over the years and sees what the overall project costs are and see how they come through at the end of completion and as they're put into service. They're able to determine what those costs are. Secondly, they're adjusted based on, as Mr. Elliott indicated earlier, adjusting the amounts based on the overall competitiveness towards getting tax credits.
Now, what's the appeal process for projects that don't make your winners list?
We notify the proposals of the recommendations, and they're afforded the ability to contact us to request an appeal. And if an appeal is requested, if the appeal is requested, then our NOFA indicates that we have an outside panel that would be convened, and we hear their concerns.
Who is that outside panel?
It varies. It depends on who was available at that time. We usually bring in outside consultants or entities, individuals from from the development community to hear their concerns.
Is there anybody that works for the housing department that ends up on that panel?
No.
No? So it's all third parties?
Correct.
And they do some kind of scoring? Do they get to see your scoring process?
And they would see our scoring process, and then they would hear the appeal from the developer as to what their concerns are.
Would these third parties ever be in a situation where they're on this panel, but they might be submitting projects of their own in the future to the
No.
housing department?
No,
No?
no.
So they're actually developers, third parties that do not interact with the housing department and ask for anything from you in the future. So therefore, that's your way of assuring their independence and looking at it in a very independent manner?
Correct.
Yes.
And you're sure about that answer?
To the best of my knowledge, Councilman.
They're from other cities or jurisdictions.
Oh, so it's staff from other jurisdictions?
Right, because basically everybody else is conflicted out, because in one way or the other, most of the people in the development community are involved in the trust fund. So to find somebody that it's...
So it's not developers? Because
No.
I thought you said it would be some
knowledgeable,
developers.
knowledgeable people, and it's usually people from the state or the county that have active housing development programs that understand these things.
Okay. Is that process done is a closed process, an open meeting process, or is it just the developer who walks in, who's appealing it, and they sit down with those individuals, or is it in an open forum like this?
It's a face-to-face meeting, and we have it in the hearing room at the department.
And it's open to the public?
It could be, yes. I mean, it is open to the public, but generally only the developers are the ones that...
Okay, so what you're saying is, custom and practice is it's open to the public. It doesn't usually attract other individuals or what have you, like you see people in the room right now, but it is open to people.
Yes.
If they want to walk in and respect the process and not disrupt it, they can sit and listen,
Right.
whoever they are.
Yes.
Okay. I'm almost done, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Um,
Ms. Perry does have some
Okay.
questions.
We're sitting here, and I'm looking at these notes. This is a process that looks like it commenced formally sometime in November. There's some dates of January 27th, but now the date that strikes me is most pressing is a March 25th date. What's March 25th have to do with this process?
That is when the proposals need to be sent to the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee. That's the deadline for proposals to apply for the tax credits.
So therefore, we should have finished our local process, because if we don't finish our local process, then all this is for naught in this go-round, and then we just have to wait for the next one.
Correct.
Right? How much time do you normally, on these rounds, how much time do you normally give the city council to hear an item like this, and then for us to accept, reject, modify, et cetera, before the round is before the deadline is over, like this March 25th date? Is it usually a month, 2 months, 3 months, couple weeks? Because it sounds like we're only got about a couple weeks right now.
It's probably only 2 weeks, and quite honestly, Councilman, we're going to be coming before you with a transmittal to request to release an OFA for the next round, which is just in a few months as well, and that we'll have a tight timeline there as well. So I think that for future, if the concern is opportunity for the council to review this, that we will start earlier for subsequent NOFA rounds to allow the council more time to be able to review.
My last question, Mr. Chairman, is, to the best that you understand this process and the interaction with this committee, what are the options that this committee has today? The simple option is to accept it, motion, second, we pass it, and we go along with the entire recommendation of the Housing Department. That's the simple option, right? Do we have the option of saying, you know what, we want, out of your 7, we want to reduce it to 5, we want to make some adjustments on the dollar figures, we want to go ahead and knock out number 2, number 5, number 2 and number 5, want to knock those out and just leave 5 of these recommendations? Or we could say, well, we want to take one of off the list of 26 applicants, we want to take number 11 and substitute it with number 2, with subsequent dollar amounts as delineated, et cetera. Could we do that?
Councilman, that's your prerogative as a governing body. The department is staffed with experts to provide this service for you, and the department has no skin in the game other than trying to maximize the limited resources, and we're trying to provide to you the best recommendations that this professional staff has for you. If the council chooses to go in a different direction, that is certainly your prerogative.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Perry?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. Wanted to know what the status is of the establishment of a recruitment radius for housing constructed with Affordable Housing Trust Fund money for residents who live in the community where housing is being built, so that they have the first opportunity to access that housing.
I'm not clear. I was familiar that we were supposed to be doing that, so forgive me, Councilwoman.
That's something I put a request in.
Okay. Well, there's a number of different report backs that we have that we'll be providing in our request to release our next NOFA. So that I believe that was perhaps one of your questions you had that we will be addressing under separate cover.
Okay, Mr. Chair, or maybe
Yes.
Andrew, we can if I can get a report back on that recruitment radius initiative, and also the status of the application process for project-based vouchers.
Yes, we'll provide that we'll report that under a separate cover.
Okay, and then in this round, how many, again, tell me how many applications were received?
26.
And then you do have an appeal process?
Yes.
Okay, and then how many will appeal?
We have not received any requests for appeals at this point.
Do you have a drop-dead date for filing an appeal?
No, we did not include that in the communication. We offered that up to the developers, indicated if they have any questions or would like to appeal, they can contact the department.
Okay, do a written appeal though, right?
Or in front of the board, as was described earlier, Councilman.
Okay.
Ms. Perry, what was your second request? I know you wanted,
The application, status of the application process for project-based vouchers, and the first one was on the recruitment radius initiative and what the status is of that, so that residents who live in the area where housing is constructed can have first opportunity to access it.
okay. Mr. Cardenas and department, I think what I would suggest is that you work with, Russ, you said maximize resources. So maybe you work with the committee staff prior to going to council to see if we can either find additional money or maximize the resources that we have, so that, again, before going to council, we might be in a position to fund additional projects, or at least take a hard look at it. So I would admit or suggest that and factor in the amendment, the concerns or the questions that were brought up by Councilmember Perry. And Mr. Cardenas, are there any other?
I have a question.
Okay, and Richard, I see you. But no, Mr. Cardenas,
One
let's deal with try to
clarification.
put this amendment together, and that's why.
One clarification, we gave them authority or direction to fund as much as 32 million, was it?
That's correct, Councilman.
And it's now 22 million that's before us?
Right.
Roughly 22 million. What was the main reason for that adjustment?
The adjustment is that the remaining balances available are in CRA redevelopment areas that we did not receive projects for or were not being awarded. So those monies will remain in those areas until such time that we have a project that we're going to submit for funding recommendations.
Okay. Which goes along with what you just said, that we need to work some things out before it goes to council.
Well, that's what I'd like to do. I'd like for us to, if this is what it is, this is what it is. But if there are, if we can take another look at this, and if there's a way to, again, using your words, maximize the resources so that we can fund additional projects, that's what I would want to do.
Certainly, we'd be more than happy to sit down with the staff and look at the projects and kind of explain in more detail how we approach this, and if there's alternate recommendations, that's fine. But what I would suggest also is the council reviews the department's request to release its next NOFA, that in a report back, that the committee look with this in mind, as the concerns that have been raised here, factor in what type of bonuses we want to include. Again, we've got limited dollars, and we've got a full city to respond to, and whether we are able to hit more than one project in the San Fernando Valley, part of it could be the fact that we're not receiving many proposals in that NOFA, or maybe we need to provide more boosts. But again, this is with the notion that we have to provide equity across the city. And we'd be more than happy to hear any suggestions you may have to enhance this program.
Okay, so in a second I will acknowledge Mr. Alarcon, but we will, before this committee is over, come up with some kind of amendment for you. And Andrew, maybe let's work on how it should be worded so that the CLA's office knows what we're doing. But Doug, as you said earlier, we probably do need to start getting together and meeting to just kind of hash out some of these things to see if we can make the department work even better than it's already working. I have the highest respect for housing, and I know that we've done an excellent job in maximizing the few coins that we're given. Mr. Alarcon.
I just wanted to clarify, one of the original purposes of this grant was to pull in a variety of funding streams to applications. But did I hear you say that you were essentially dinging projects that had access to Prop C funds?
They are, well, in this particular round, we are, Councilman, because we've been instructed by the Tax Credit Allocation Committee that they would not accept those proposals that had that commitment without some form of backing, and the proposals that came forward do not have that backing.
Without some form of backing?
From a bank or some other lending institution that guarantees those monies. Because right now, it's an unfunded commitment from the state that requires the state to issue this bond, and at such time the state's not issuing those bonds and there's no monies there. So it would require some other form of cash up front to be able to guarantee those monies. And right now there are no...
Were the applicants aware of this before?
Yes, they were. They were advised they need to provide some form of guarantee, and we did not receive any guarantees that were satisfactory to KECAC.
Guarantees that were satisfactory?
Correct. We had one developer that provided a personal guarantee, and that was rejected by the Tax Credit Allocation Committee. It had to be some form of a private lender of some kind, or public financing.
So it just seems ironic that you're requesting, not you, but the state is requesting matching dollars.
It's an unfortunate situation that the housing departments are dealing with up and down the state of California, trying to figure out how we're going to resolve these Prop 1C projects. Until such time the state issues these bonds, we're looking now to private banks to try to come up with some sort of formula to our program that be able to provide some sort of backstop on these projects.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alarcon. Okay, so how I think we go with this amendment is, again, what Ms. Perry wants is exact. So I think we can just use the language that she used. But Ms. Sauer, I want to, in the interest of maximizing the resources of the housing department, that they are directed to work with committee staff to determine if there are dollars available to fund more projects prior to their coming to council. Okay? Is there a problem with that? Okay. Then, with that said, we would, without objection, will adopt the housing report as amended. Now, Mr. City Attorney, do we need to go back into our regular meeting?
I think we adjourn the regular meeting.
So now I can just adjourn this meeting. Ms. Sauer, is there any more business before this special?
No.
Then this committee is adjourned. This hearing is adjourned.